In 2017, I walked into the Fox 5 News archive called The Tape Room. I found stories from old newscasts, crimes that to this day remained unsolved. So we created a true crime podcast called The Tape Room to help bring these unsolved crimes back into the light. These are just a few of those stories.
And the last time I saw my brother was in the hallway where he died. And I told him, you need to get a gun.
Greenwich Village got a shock. A brazen robbery in the middle of the day, and the victim turned out to be a man a lot of New Yorkers knew.
And I get to the door and I open the door. It felt like the world had stopped.
There are at least one or two good suspects. It's just that we lack the evidence to be able to prove it.
March 4th, May 19th, 2000. His death shocked the city. Now the state Supreme Court is taking a second look. I'm Dan Bowens, and this is The Tape Room.
He was a bigger-than-life person. That's the only way I can describe him. He was always there for you when you needed him.
Come on, please put this aside. That's all you need.
Abe Lebewohl was living the American dream, a Holocaust survivor who became a successful business owner in Manhattan.
He really wanted to provide for his family. That was his dream.
Jack Lebewohl is Abe's younger brother.
He was a Holocaust survivor. There were a number of years where my parents and my brother barely survived.
Abe made it. By 1996, after 40 years in business, his 2nd Avenue Deli on the Lower East Side was thriving.
The deli at that time is different than the deli today in the following sense. You had people who would come to the deli and literally 5, 6, 7 days a week to eat.
And then everything changed that morning on March 4th. Rosanna, this is early March 1996.
Greenwich Village got a shock. A brazen
Good Day New
robbery
York's
in the middle of
Rosanna
the day,
Scotto was behind the
and
Fox
turned out
5
to be a man
anchor
a
desk
lot of
that
New
day.
Yorkers knew.
Crime felt very different back then. It just felt more commonplace. And Abe's murder, though, still shook us to the core because Abe was the quintessential New Yorker.
Because Abe was a fixture on local TV, always inviting media to his restaurant for stories and delivering food to newsrooms.
He was very generous. He always sent all these great, delicious sandwiches to every TV station. Corned beef, pastrami, pickles, you name it, he had it.
Abe had a big heart, and many of us just couldn't understand how this happened to him.
Out of nowhere, all this happens. Do you remember that day?
I relived that day. You can't imagine how I relived it. I left the restaurant, I had to do something. I get to my office, either a few minutes before or a few minutes after 9. My secretary says to me, Jack, your brother got hurt. You have to go over to Bellevue.
Abe was making a bank deposit when he was robbed, thieves in the van or waiting nearby, from our reporting on that day.
He managed to drive his deli van down East 4th Street despite suffering 3 gunshot wounds, 1 to the head. He didn't quite make it to the end of the block when he pulled over and fell out.
We were vested in it because he was a part of our lives, and we were all discussing it in the newsroom, trying to figure out what happened to Abe.
Rosanna says the media, the city, couldn't help but speculate.
Who would do this to Abe? Somebody who knew his schedule. Had to be an inside job.
At the beginning, I thought they would have something.
Jack says on the day of the funeral, police made a discovery.
They found in Central Park my brother's wallet, his bag where he carried the money deposit, and if I'm not mistaken, they even found the remnants of the gun.
They did find that gun the same day as Abe's funeral. Ballistics testing showed it was linked to another crime, a double homicide about 6 months earlier, but it never led to anything in Abe's case. All these years later, investigators who first worked on it are still in touch with the family.
They're still on the case, and they don't want to give up. This is my brother.
The painting on the wall inside the new 2nd Avenue Deli on the Upper East Side, a reminder of the original restaurant.
This was in the early part of 1978.
The family operates 2 new delis now, this one on the Upper East Side at 75th Street, with a brand new lounge on the 2nd floor, and another one on East 33rd Street. They say both of the delis are a perfect tribute to Abe.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't operate the way Abe operated them, but you can't. Time changes things. but we try. Say, what would Abe do under the current circumstances?
The Lebewohl family is offering a reward, $150,000 to anyone who can help solve this case. If you have information, you're urged to call Crime Stoppers, 1-800-577-TIPS. Our next case brings us here, the northernmost tip of Manhattan, Inwood Hill Park. The 2004 murder of a Juilliard student, Sarah Fox. She'd gone running one day when she vanished. A few days later, they found her body in a remote section of this park. Ever since, investigators have been trying to figure out who did it.
Sarah was a good friend of mine, and to me, what happened to her to end her life doesn't define her.
What story would these woods tell about that day 15 years ago, the one when Sarah Fox vanished?
We started at the bottom of the park. It's pretty large, and at first we made a human chain, and we were combing the area together, but it was going very slowly.
It's a volunteer search party in late May 2004, combing the woods of Inwood Park, nearly 190 acres at the northern tip of Manhattan, known for its isolated trails and rugged forestry.
So I just remember coming up a hill on the path, and somebody from the search group ahead of us came running down the path towards us, and he just said, "Stop, stop, we found somebody."
Sarah Fox, a 21-year-old Juilliard student found dead. The voice you've been hearing is one of Sarah's childhood friends. She didn't want us to identify her because the killer is still out there.
It makes you reevaluate the world and how you think about people and what you think is possible.
In May of 2004, everything seemed possible for Fox. The petite 21-year-old actress with spiky blonde hair from South Jersey, a promising career on stage or cinema on the horizon. So she's coming from...
I believe she's coming from her home.
Right down the street.
Right down the block.
Detective Robert Dewhurst is with the NYPD's Cold Case Squad.
Yeah, we have a witness that sees her entering the park that confirms she entered the park that evening.
6 days later, the search party finds her nude body in the thick bushes and trees.
She was badly decomposed, and she was not on the particular trail.
Police at the time said she'd been strangled, bones in her neck and one rib broken.
You're going to look at everybody around her, see if she had any known enemies. You're going to look at the park itself. You want to see if there's any known various incidents which took place prior to it.
Complicating the investigation, media reports revealing the body was surrounded by petals from a tulip tree, leading some to speculate the body was staged, some sort of ritual. All these years later, Dewhurst says it's still a theory, but...
There was these tulips around her, but the tulip is particularly indicative to this park. There's several trees with that tulip.
Sort of common.
Yeah.
Investigators eventually keying in on this man, Dimitri Scheinman, known to walk his dog unleashed through the park.
He had several altercations with many different people in the park, and basically based upon his dog possibly not being on a leash.
Scheinman became the #1 suspect after claiming he was a clairvoyant, providing details of the crime scene to investigators. But he was never charged, not enough evidence linking him to the killing. He later moved his family out of the country to South Africa.
At any point, if he were to come back to America, and let alone New York City, I would give him an opportunity to speak with him.
The detective returns to the park every year to put up flyers, hoping for a break, hoping someone who knows something will come forward.
We mainly work for the victims and their family, and in the end, if it's successful, we're going to give answers to the family as to what happened and why.
It was a long time ago, but Sarah is someone I'll never forget. I just try to take that and all of those good things about her forward into my life. I absolutely want justice for Sarah, but that doesn't change the person that I knew and I was friends with.
If you have information about this case, please call Crime Stoppers, 1-800-577-TIPS.
Call my mom and I'm like, Mom, you know, something happened to Molly, where are you? And I look at him and I just look at him in my eyes and I'm like, what's going on with my son? And he's like, I'm sorry, your son is dead. And the last time I saw my brother was in the hallway where he died. And I told him, you need to get a gun. You need to have more protection.
The young entrepreneur living his dream.
What's up, y'all? It's Captain.
Jamal Gaines turned a passion for sneakers into his own store.
He really liked the crime.
That shop in Rahway, New Jersey, selling some of the rarest footwear on the market, his sister, Divinity Gaines.
LeBron's, Kobe's, any Nike you wanted, any colorway you wanted. And if he didn't have it, he can find it for you.
Then one night, it was all ripped away.
In the video, you can see two men standing there with masks on. Jamal's sitting here, he has a cup in his hand.
No mother should see what Tina Wilson has, the last seconds of her son's life.
He gets up, he throws his drink in the guy's face and attacks one of them. He's fighting the one guy, and then you see the other person there, and then he gets shot, and he's still fighting.
She says Gaines, known simply as Molly, was defending his store, that dream.
And I'm just, what's going on, my son? Where's my son? No one's saying anything. And it's a man police officer here and a woman police officer here. And I look at him and I just look at him in my eyes and I'm like, what's going on with my son? And he's like, I'm sorry, your son is dead.
Yeah, I'm feeling like a man right now.
It wasn't supposed to be this way, of course. Gaines was a self-described sneakerhead, meaning he bought, collected, and sold coveted shoes, like those high-priced Air Jordans or hard-to-find Adidas Yeezys from Kanye West.
He would sit outside of these sneaker stores, whether it be Foot Locker, Champs, Kicks USA. You would just sit out there and you just wait all night.
What started as a passion when he was a boy, leading to a business opportunity as he got older.
Say it released for $180 retail. He can sell it for almost like $800.
By 21 years old, Jamal and his friends, some he'd known since childhood, went for it, opening their own store. They called their shop in downtown Rahway East Coast Boutique, and business was booming. High demand for the product and lots of cash on hand. After a few years, Divinity worried the store would become a target.
We were in the back of the shop in the hallway where he was murdered, and I was just telling him, I'm like, I think that you should get a gun, like something that doesn't really feel right.
Just a few days later, it happened that night, February 26, 2016.
It felt like the world had stopped.
It was a Friday night after hours. Jamal and his friends were in the back of the store when there was a knock at the door, two men with guns. Most people inside ran away, but Jamal ran toward them, fighting them. That's when he was shot. His best friend and co-owner, Corey Morris, was also inside and explained what happened next to our podcast, The Tape Room.
He was actually laying there in a puddle of his own blood at that point. Literally holding him and screaming his name as he's taking his last breaths. That's the last I got of it.
The Union County Prosecutor's Office releasing this video of the two suspects running off into the alley, one of them with a pronounced limp. It's still unclear if Jamal was targeted or if this was a robbery gone wrong.
They were coming after the store, even though they shot him, he was still just fighting as he was going down. He went out there charging like a lion, and that's what we named his foundation after, Lion-Hearted Legend, because he had so much freaking heart.
I'm so very thankful for this day.
For 3 years, with the case unsolved, the family's foundation has mentored kids, middle and high school students, hosting events like this basketball tournament in their hometown.
Jamal wanted to do everything in his life.
While this family waits for justice, they hope to turn their pain, their loss, into something special, something Jamal would be proud of.
Let's let the balloons go. Love you, Molly.
If you have more information about this case, call the Union County Crime Stoppers number 1-908-654-8477.
Honestly, up until Sean Henning got convicted, I wasn't worried because I knew that I didn't do the crime.
There's a color bar calibration for case number A85
It happened in December, way back in 1985.
Following scene concerns that of a white male found dead in his home at this address.
A 65-year-old man named Everett Carr murdered.
Upper head portion of the victim may now be noted in the screen.
His home in New Milford, a suburb in Connecticut, turned to a crime scene. The victim was stabbed 27 times, his throat slit, his head bashed in. The blood was everywhere.
It's an extremely bloody crime scene. There's blood that pooled all around the body, blood sprayed up the wall, almost to the ceiling.
A burglary gone wrong, police said, zeroing in on Sean Henning and Ralph Ricky Birch, who were eventually convicted of the murder. The testimony from forensic expert Dr. Henry Lee helping to put them away. For 3 decades, Henning and Birch, who were 17 and 18 years old at the time of the killing, maintained their innocence. Now, the Connecticut State Supreme Court is taking a second look.
Are we ready to proceed, counsel?
With new, serious questions about that evidence from Lee, who has since become a world-renowned criminologist, rising to fame during the O.J. Simpson case.
No test had been done. Dr. Lee told the jury that a test had been done, and the state knew that that wasn't true.
Before the court date in Connecticut, Ricky Birch incarcerated at the Osborne Correctional Institution, sending this letter to Fox 5. During our call, Birch admits, yes, in 1985, he and Sean Henning were burglarizing homes in the area.
At that time, I was the kind of person that nobody wanted their kids to hang out with.
But a killer? Not a chance, he says, just dumb kids stealing VCRs to pay for their drug habit.
Honestly, up until Sean Henning got convicted, I wasn't worried because I knew that I didn't do the crime.
Jim Cousins is Sean Henning's counsel on behalf of the legal organization Centurion. They argue years before he became famous, Henry Lee gave false testimony about blood on a towel, a key piece of evidence.
The towel hadn't been tested. He said he had tested it. The towel didn't have blood on it. He said it did have blood on it.
Andrew O'Shea is Birch's attorney. He says DNA testing done decades after the crime also showed a third person, likely female, at the scene, but nothing linking Ricky and Sean.
I mean, it's outrageous that we've spent all this time and all these resources keeping them in jail while the true killers are out there.
Henning and Birch are appealing an earlier court decision denying a new trial, even though that judge determined Dr. Lee did testify erroneously about the towel, finding the forensic expert made a mistake. Recently, in a phone interview, we spoke with Dr. Lee while he was lecturing in China.
Dr. Lee, there are a lot of questions about your testimony in this case, though.
Actually, that's not the news. They draw every straw to attack the original case.
Lee, who is now 80 years old, stands by his testimony and insists presumptive but non-conclusive field tests of the towel were likely the basis of his testimony. Besides, he says statements from other witnesses incriminating Henning and Birch and not that towel convinced the jury.
This blood issue has nothing to do with the case. They try to make them all become something they can appeal.
Henning has already been released after serving nearly 30 years in prison. He's hoping now to clear his name. Ricky is still locked up. Inside, he volunteers with a hospice program, also spending time working with dogs that will eventually help soldiers with PTSD. After all these years, he says he's found a higher power, and to our surprise, says he isn't bitter.
If none of this happened to me and I remained on the street, I think that I would have been dead.
Attorneys for Ricky and Sean are expecting a decision by the spring. They're hoping the Connecticut State Supreme Court will vacate the convictions. We'll be right back. You can hear more about these cases and extended interviews for each one on our podcast. We think it's important to bring these old cases back into the light. I'm Dan Bowens, and this is The Tape Room.